meat is bonded to a goose. And they just absorb it and become a complete asshole. But then if that goose dies, that's where you get the one or two. Then if that goose dies, that's where you get the one or two, like...
Oh, the angry Canadians.
And they move to Quebec or something.
Yeah. So we call it the old city.
It's
not historical, it's just where we send all the people that are full of hate.
Which appropriately sounds like something out of Lovecraft.
We give them another language so you can't hear them swear at you. If you try to talk to them in that language, they get even worse. Well, it all makes sense.
Well, it's French, right? Kind of.
Yeah, like here's like, oh, because my grandparents are in Quebec. She's like, oh, I'd love to go visit them, and then I can speak French. And I'm like, oh no, don't do that, don't do that. Oh, I know it's different. Yeah, no, you don't understand the reaction you will get.
Can open worms sprinkling everywhere.
Because you'll go in a store and they'll be like, salut, you'll be like, salut, and you'll be like, hello. As soon as you say it, they're like, hello, we realize you speak English, do not even try the French. We just
Now we look at you with disdain.
Life is shit. That's always my favorite.
Yeah.
You should write something for the Furry Writers Guild anthology.
Which anthology are we up to? Because
The second one, which I'm editing.
okay.
It's more, okay, so I've taken it this time, and instead of just, because I've already done my own, and I realized, like, I really like to do it on my own to a point, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I've seen people co-author, I'm like, that's good, but sometimes you just need to go, this is how it's going to be done.
Yes.
But because this is the guild, and there's a lot of people that want to learn how to edit in that, so I'm doing it as kind of an apprenticeship. So I've had some people send in applications if they want a junior edit or proofread or slush pile read. And so we're like, okay, you guys will be my slush pile. One or two of you will pick to be a junior editor. You can help me edit the stories, so you get to see what's inside, keep your communications.
Okay, that's kind of
Because where else are you going to get that experience, honestly?
Yeah,
and it's the
that's
guild, so it's the perfect time.
That's kind of part of what I've been doing with Husky for the first game. That way, because I have for the first few rounds, what I'm trying to do as time goes on is I would send her, okay, please do initial edits on these stories, and then when I did my edit pass, I would show her what I changed and say, okay, you can be harsher, you can get out the red pen more, because they can always say if they really have a problem with it.
Yeah, I want to do something similar. Like, was there a story in the slush pile you really liked you want to edit? Okay, you do that. Look at you whatever edits. Do not pick at their commas and unless that really bothers you. Otherwise, I don't want to do proofreading. We just want to work on high concepts.
Yeah.
Because I know there are some writers out there that will just, why did you spend 5 minutes telling me what my commas are wrong? And you're just like, because I wanted the story to be good. Some are fine with that. Some are just, like I've had Ray Chan send me a story and I'm just like, what's important here? Because over here you're telling me that I'm using the wrong verb, while over here you're telling me this whole paragraph should be scrapped.
Yeah. It's,
Oh, there he is.
oh, there he is.
I should
Now
have asked
we
you to
are
bring
free.
me another drink. I'm sorry.
Wipe up.
Water. I remember to bring my propaganda this time.
Oh,
So I forgot the propaganda last.
let's go.
Ooh, what'd you bring for everybody?
Rawr.
Bookmarks and cards.
Rawr. I might just leave some.
Yeah, that is fine. This is the writing room, so it is apropos.
Because I'll forget otherwise. If I almost forgot to pack
As long
it,
as
the server
it's
would have
not-
hit me.
As long as it's not like some little crude hand-drawn booklet saying, "Have you heard the good news?"
Oh no.
Those
Serval
are
did really good work on this. Like, have you seen this?
Oh, that's a nice picture.
Oh, wait. That's half the picture. Look at that.
There's
Now everybody's
more.
looking at us going, what the heck?
But wait, there's more.
Ooh. Yeah.
Impressive.
Anyways.
Good stuff.
It makes me feel bad for not bringing the Furry Writers Guild stuff.
Yeah, I was going to ask who was bringing the Furry Writers Guild stuff this year, because
I just have stuff left over.
oh boy.
Point is, rabbits are trapped in the 19th century.
Hey,
No.
you, sign my book. And then go to RAR. We I don't think we should start just yet, but we probably should.
We should probably go ahead and do intros since all three of us are here. I imagine people are going to trickle in from their various dinner locales and things of that nature.
Connect and cheat, but this guy's only learning to grow hands. Sorry, let's start.
Yeah. So from their perception of left to right starts with me, so... Hi. Hi. We have sound. This is awesome. Inside my voice. I am Giannis J. Wolf. I've been doing the writing track for the last couple of years here. I've written some stories that have been published. I've edited some anthologies through Rabbit Valley. You can find some of my stuff at the Fur Planet table. I think some of it is already sold out, but you just have to look for things like Altered States, which is the Transformation Anthology. If you go to Rabbit Valley, you can find Pulp and the Trick or Treat series. So my plugging is done. We move on.
Hi, I'm Ocean Tigrox. I'm a writer and editor. I have a bunch of stories and such things like Fang and The Last Roar, and I don't know anymore at this point. I also edited this book, Inhuman X. It's a noir anthology. This guy's in it. That guy has to sign it because he's in it too. This guy's in it too. Check it out. Also, I'm representing Roar because I'm on the board. It's a writer's workshop. Right now it's run by Kyle Gold and a bunch of us. If you'd like more information, you should come check it out. There are bookmarks and whatnot and propaganda.
There will also be a panel tomorrow discussing it.
Oh, is it tomorrow?
Yeah.
Definitely check that out.
Tomorrow afternoon there's a Q&A about what RAR is.
Nice, excellent. So I'm Slipwolf. I've got workout right now in Heat 13 as well as Fang 7 and Gods with Fur. Those are both at the Fur Planet table, as well as coming out in Fragments of Life's Heart with Weasel Press and Knotted with Weasel Press. So that's what's going on with me right now. So action.
Yes. This is a fun panel that we've done a couple different times. Basically about writing action scenes and the challenges and the thinking about technology and thinking about how the body moves and how the body can't move if you're going to stay alive and
Even just
what
writing
happens
that
when
erotica and their knee cannot go up their nose and around the corner.
exactly unless they're like a stoat or other a ferret or
Results.
yeah other furred tube animal. Or also talking about when one character forcibly stops another character from being alive, how does that work? So we'll talk some about that.
Depending on what they use, probably really well.
Well, yeah. Well, there's a reason we have attempted murder as a crime because
Yes.
it doesn't always happen.
But
But yeah, we'll discuss a few things. Also talk about injuries and dealing with what happens, and also dealing with how cinematic versus realistic you want your piece to be, because for entertainment purposes, there is kind of a sliding scale on there when you're writing action scenes. So, and
Yeah.
I'm rambling and talking, so you guys interrupt me.
How about you? Yeah, action scenes are a great way. So there's many different reasons to have an action scene in a story. Obviously, maybe there's a heightened, tense moment of a climax or something's about to go on. Sometimes you just want to have, usually it's for some escalating, rising action or a climax to solve the story. Maybe we finally finish off the bad guy, or maybe he's stolen your child and you try to fight back and then he runs off and the story is started.
Eventually, Liam Neeson just needs to put a leash on that kid. LoJack or something, I don't know.
But that's one of the first questions you want to have is, why am I having this action scene? Is it because it would be cool to have two guys shoot guns at each other? Sure, but what is that actually doing for your story? How is this progressing the plot? Is this going to cause a severe injury to your character that they will have to overcome for the others, going back to injuries? Because if you don't and they get shot 50 times, suddenly you start to border on Mary Sue territory.
Unless you literally have magical or high science means that have been justified in your story, when someone actually gets a broken arm, shot, any of these debilitating things, they're going to be down for a while. They're not necessarily going to muscle up and go, I'll get through this with my broken leg. No, they're going to be on the floor going, oh, that hurts and I would love morphine.
Or should be, right?
Yeah.
Cinematic universe is replete with people breaking common physics, James Bond movies, oh, I broke my arm, but...
It's okay, I had a Band-Aid.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yo,
Maybe we
yeah.
have sex and you just tell Em I'm fine for this mission. Okay. It's one of those things where I find, I don't know if you guys agree with this or not, I find in fiction, even though it's not directly visually experienced, it is harder to pull off unrealistic injuries, if you properly describe them, than it is in movies where, how old is Bruce Willis now? Again, he can fight a guy on a Harrier jet and jump off of it and it explodes all over him and he just gets up and
And then he does Red, where he's retired and still kicks ass.
Yeah.
This summer, terrorists will seize Bruce Willis's nursing home, and they'll discover old habits die hard.
Die hardest.
Yeah.
So that reminds me of the original of the Raiders of the Lost Ark. That was actually something Harrison Ford mentioned to the director, to Steven Spielberg. He says, "Yeah, look, I know this. We're recreating a pulp adventure here, but I don't want to be I don't want to have the cosmetic scratch on the end of it." So after he's been dragged behind a truck, thrown off, punched, shot at, you have the whole freighter scene where he's up there, he's going to the wounds, where he tries to flip the mirror, and then you get the screaming.
Classic scene.
Yeah. It's one of those. It's. Oh, sorry. Was someone just said that? Oh, okay.
To say, to add with the people being down for a little while, I can say from personal experience, unless you have an extremely high pain tolerance, a broken bone puts you out of it for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And now,
I just say on the same vein, you find a lot of the best action scenes and a lot of the best, just in terms of a visual thing, but also just communication fiction as well. A lot of the best action scenes actually effectively communicate that fact that injuries basically start to take stuff out of you. I'll cite one of my favorite examples, Daredevil on Netflix. Season 1, the hallway fight. If you've seen it, you know what I'm talking
Brilliant
about.
scene.
But one of the reasons why it's such an awesome scene, that single take thing with, I think it was
They never moved, it's just one shot down the hallway.
Yeah, well, it moves around and he moves around, but he goes in a room, beats up some guys, comes out, beats up some more guys. But what makes it so compelling is that it isn't just fist flying all over the place. You can see him visibly getting tired. You can see the wounds starting to hurt him. He's basically having trouble throwing some punches. And you can tell that he's starting to run out of gas at the sort of same time that they're starting to run out of bad guys, and it's which tank is going to empty first. Are they going to run out of bad guys? You get the idea that, as a hero, it's probably one or the other. But invincibility, let's just face it, it's boring.
and that wondering who's going to run out first, that creates actual tension, because we've all had that experience of watching an action movie and it gets to the final fight, which should be really intense, but in certain ones it's just, this is no longer interesting because I already know what's going to happen. I already know who's going to win. I know they're going to win with barely a scratch on them. Whereas you've seen action series where even if you're pretty sure the hero's going to win, it sucks you into it because of the way it's put together, because of the way it's composed. And writing can definitely be the same way. You have to find those beats. You have to find the tempo that's going to keep that intensity going.
Yeah, a lot of writing is all about the tempo, getting the beats down, having this pace. You just want to hit, move, So when you figured out why you're going to have this action scene, what is the point of it, you want to make sure that the scene is revolving around that. Take a kidnapping scene. There's usually the back and forth. The bad guys have come in and taken say the child, and then they're able to reverse back and get the kid back, but now it's that game of football of pushing back and forth. And then you're rising the action as it goes along. They grab them, they punch them, they take the kid again, and then who's going to come out on top?
And yet space things out so it's not relentless and endless. I mean, if you're going to have a long fight, even if you do have a long, a hallway fight again, I guess is an example, you're still going to break that up with a long period of reflection after, because we all do get weary of basically seeing something never ending. And just going back for a second to the mortality thing, I mean, it's basically forcing the character to find another way out of things other than just using their fists is what actually makes it compelling. Too much action, even if it's justified, is still boring. I'm trying to remember the name of the movie that actually, it was a gangster movie that came out like 2-3 years ago. Sean Penn was the bad guy.
He was like Gangster Squad or something
yes,
like that.
yeah.
Which would have been much more interesting if it was like a bunch of kids fighting 30s gangsters or something.
Yes,
but, yeah.
because I mean the end of that movie is just, let's go get the bad guys. Okay, yeah, sure, we got nothing to do, let's go get the bad guys. And they come in and basically shoot up a hotel and shoot up all these bad guys and get Sean Penn out and they have a fist fight. And I'm stronger than you, no you're not, boom boom, he's down and that's the end of the movie. To be fair, they had to reshoot a lot of that movie because they had a different, more structured resolution. They had a different action scene that actually involved a shooting in a movie theater, and because of a sensitive real life event that happened at that time, they had to make some changes. But the point is, action in and of itself was the solution, with nothing, with no impetus behind it. So for that reason, basically, it was just kind of a dull slog in the end. It's like, okay, you're going to hit him, he's going to fall down at some point. It might as well be one punch from now instead of 6. I guess the point I'm getting at is, it's not what action you put in, it's what is the value of it, what is it towards, and what's the impetus of it, what's the relevance of it, basically, to your plot and to what's going on in the heads of your characters, because every action scene is basically expressing something inward. And I'm going to hand it back to you guys, but another example, and this is a big one, Star Wars. Every time they have a lightsaber battle, they configure it differently, they find different interesting things to do, but ultimately, I think it was for doing Return of the Jedi, they were talking about basically how they're going to structure the fight scene, the critical one there between Luke and Vader, and we were all either really young when that came out, or we've all seen it into the woo. You know, it's an incredible thing. And they were like, well, you know what? Let's not even have like a really acrobatic, crazy thing, because ultimately it's just two guys banging sticks together. What's keeping people watching is, why are they banging those glowing sticks together? And it's that emotional drive of that final confrontation that actually gives you the impetus to make it interesting. So I guess in terms of not just structuring action, but making action relevant, how do you guys tackle that?
Well, when you talk about Star Wars, one of the best things to do is that, yes, there are lightsabers involved in that Return of the Jedi fight, but that's not the actual battle that's going on. Mm-hmm. The lightsabers are incidental, because the actual battle that's going on is the battle for Luke's soul, which, from an emotional standpoint, from a what path is he going to take standpoint, is much more interesting than we are simply going to try and kill each other with laser swords. Now, that doesn't dismiss the fight in Empire Strikes Back, because that has its own different emotional resonance. That the battle is between, you have the young hero who thinks he's ready to go, and the fully trained assassin, essentially, who's basically showing him, sure, I'll play the game for a little while, and then I'm going to throw parts of a station at you to remind you that you're a kid. Because without the emotional resonance, without the battle for the soul, the battle for, like you're talking about, it's just hitting sticks together. So in your action scene, look for what the real battle is.
The thing is, I'm banging sticks together. Well, in the Empire, in Return of the Jedi, also fits thematically, because Luke, well, for starters, he never wanted to engage Vader during it. And when he did, he was basically going berserk. And 3, yeah, think about it. Vader's the classically trained Jedi from the Temple days. Luke, he basically got the wartime emergency training course. Basically got it. Because Yoda is bad absolutely, so he's still a little guy. He basically didn't have time to train him the classical way.
And this also, in this, I will definitely come to you in a second. So in this we find, and this is true of a lot of action scenes, your actions and what your people do physically is important. Where you intersperse dialogue is incredibly important, because in a lot of cases, it is much more interesting if characters are actually talking to help make relevance, which
Other than you just having action.
Yeah, which may not
goes
be-
back to the pacing.
and that also goes to maybe that's not entirely realistic in a real fight, but it makes for much more interesting fiction. We'll talk about some timing and things like that.
Let's go back to the Star Wars thing. The emotional impact of a fight scene. The scene where he's got that one-handed lightsaber and he's just smashing and smashing, and then he stops the fight and throws it away. That is memorable. Spending around like we're at a rave for all three of the prequel movies, like, I mean,
Doom, 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 doom.
that's the difference is like,
Duel of the Base.
name
Yeah.
one portion of any one of those scenes, like,
Oh.
you remember the music, you
Oh,
you
yeah.
remember the music, but
'Cause John
the
Williams is
scenes
always awesome.
themselves were workplace.
But well, that's what you talk about, because it's not just Luke throwing away the lightsaber. It's the button has been pressed where it's, I'll just take your sister if you won't, because his friends are the weak point. But it's also about he sees the mechanical stump of the hand, looks at his own mechanical hand and realizes he is on the exact same track, and that's what makes him throw it away. It's all those little moments, those physical activities that all have to come together, and that's true of any action scene. So I don't want to get too hung up on Star Wars, because we're all geeks in here. We could probably talk about Star Wars ad infinitum. But
You're talking about quipping or talking during a fight. This isn't a fight per se. Larry Niven's Football. There was a scene that I still remember from when I first read it today, where they're launching an Orion gunship from the ground, and you get a reverend up from one of the damage control crew, and it's going, the text is bam, 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 bam for each nuclear detonation, and then the guy's thinking, it sounded like God was knocking on the bathroom door. He wanted it in bam.
that is a good line. And this also gets into the different types of action that you can put into.
Versus like the macro, like battlefield action versus
Well, you have
one-on-one combat.
you have battlefields. You have one-on-one combat. You have car chase scenes.
Yeah.
You have ship-to-ship battle, whether it's in space or at sea.
Or you have action that's deliberately slowly played out because,
Intense.
yeah, like what I'm thinking of as an example of that is both in the novel and in the film adaptations, the final last 100 steps or so of Frodo going up Mount Doom and then not being able to carry that ring anymore, and then Samwise carries it for him. And that was a really good, it's like every step he takes, it's like the remaining distance is cut in half, and the remaining distance is still cut in half, but he never quite gets there because every step is harder than the last. And it's the whole thing about it's everything slowing way down to emphasize exactly how difficult this task is of separating himself from this object of ultimate temptation. It is basically the complete opposite of how action is typically structured, in that things get more frenetic and fast-paced towards the end. With the occasional, as we were talking, breaks for dialogue and stuff. But this kind of, especially not so much with fiction, especially with film, where basically it's like the closer to the end, the more explosive everything has to be. And you can look at like, what's his head, Rock, and director I'm thinking about. He doesn't make sense. He just makes movies.
I'm horrible with movies.
Yeah.
Okay. Are you sorry?
Michael Bay.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh,
yeah.
God.
Any Michael Bay movie, everything has to blow the fuck sideways, like completely up. At the end of the movie for anything.
And that's the problem with something like Michael Bay. Again, this is a great example. A Michael Bay action flick versus like what happens with Raiders of the Lost Ark, or even the first Die Hard.
Yeah.
You watch a Michael Bay action movie, especially something like the Transformers franchise and things like that. I've tried watching it sometimes, and I look at it and go, they're all dead. Right there. Everyone in the movie has just, they're just getting up and they've got a boo-boo or a scrape. No. Physically, they would all be dead after the building fell over and they had to slide down the glass and then drop 3 stories out of that. Yeah.
Jesus
No,
loves you,
not
Ewan
really.
McGregor. Jesus loves you, Ewan McGregor.
Yeah.
Which movie was that? The one where he was a clone? And they literally, they did exactly what you said. They fell off the side of a 50-story building. And past that point, it's like, this is supposed to be a real world thing, but they basically had the structural resistance of like the Barbapapas or something. They're not even human beings.
Kryptonian, yeah.
They just bounced off the floor essentially, and it's like there's no consequence. There's no tension anymore because.
Yeah. Whereas with something like, again, Raiders or the first Die Hard, not some of the sequels, but the first one,
Yeah.
where you can set up a cinematic tone where someone is stretching the limits and the boundaries of human ability. And if you stick to that tone, you can suspend the disbelief up to a certain point. You can add some extra cables to that bridge by, this is cinematic tone, it's not completely realistic. But at the Michael Bay weight, no amount of suspension will hold that bridge up. So that's where, again, when writing your action scenes, you've really got to think about what can the body take and how far can I stretch that for this guy's the peak of human condition or things like that.
Glad you brought up Raiders again.
Oh, if I add on to that real quick.
Oh, sure.
There's a recent movie, I won't say what, just I'm keeping it spoiler free, where there's an explosion in a public place, and it was like after this whole series of, this really frenetic action scene, no one's really getting hurt, it's just, it's really exciting action scene, recent comic book movie. But then there's this explosion, and I'm like, okay, so there's an explosion, let's get on with the fight. But all of a sudden, all the characters are like, oh my gosh, an explosion, there was an explosion. And then we hear in the news, it's like, oh, well, a whole bunch of people were really hurt. And it's like, well, as a viewer, I didn't understand that because we were watching this scene where nothing mattered. And all of a sudden it was like something happened, but it was difficult to differentiate between those two actions because the movie made it seem like, everybody was like, unkillable and unhurtable, and all of a sudden something happened that actually hurt people. And that impact was lessened because of the way it was presented.
Playing into that trope, though, that's an interesting idea. Like, oh, these are, superheroes or whatever, they're unstoppable, and then you find out that they're not, or they pull back and you see the collateral damage that they've caused. That's an interesting idea to play into the reader's expectations.
On the flip side, I love Superman versus the Elite. It shows how much, because Superman's one of those characters, he's invincible. He can have a fight scene, but it's usually, they're not as exciting because unless they have kryptonite, they just punch each other until they're tired. In that story, it's a group of kids kind of punking him like, we can outsmart Superman, we can beat you. And they push him to the edge where he actually goes, okay, you want to go? This is the amount of power I actually have. And he just uses it on them, just to show that the actual power that he has is monumental, and the real power that he uses is restricting that, because else he would do the Michael Bay thing and just blow everything up.
It's the world of cardboard speech.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is brilliantly written, even if you've not watched the whole series. At some point, you can find it on Netflix, the last episode of Justice League Unlimited has an amazing bit of dialogue where he's talking about, to Darkseid, about, my life is like walking through a world of cardboard. I always have to be careful about it. And it's well done because it shows what he has to deal with on a daily basis. It shows it's not necessarily great to be completely superpowered.
Yeah, and one accidentally sneeze and someone's dead.
Yeah.
So going back a step too, it's not good to see either. Just still using Superman. And the recent Zack Snyder movies, which, let's be honest, they say have a lot of problems, and a lot of people criticize them, and I don't necessarily love them either, but Superman versus Zod at the end of Man of Steel was boring as hell to watch because it was an incredible guy versus another indestructible guy bouncing off and hitting that cardboard, right?
There was no escalation in that fight.
Nothing. It was basically
throw him into
neither
another
of them could
building,
hurt.
zap him over there.
Yeah, there was nothing they could do to each other.
Finally reach a point where the actual conflict is your morals.
Yeah, because literally they could throw someone in a volcano and they just come up and be like, "Oh, you made me mad now," right? There was no consequence to that. But then you go to the recent movie, and it's the one part that I actually really liked was at the beginning with Bruce Wayne zipping through Metropolis, because I don't know if he works out of Gotham, but he has his office in Metropolis. Anyway, don't worry about it. Where it was the same fight again, but it was a ground level with actual fragile, real human beings running around, stuff's falling on them, buildings are coming down, and the same scene is now terrifying because now we're actually seeing the same thing with visible consequences to the direct people involved. And that's the whole principle of, make it consequential, make it matter. There has to be penalties, potential penalties. I mean, psychological penalties, absolutely. There was that as well, and that was dealt with later. But you need something on the surface more than that, basically, to keep people engaged, both in literature and film. And just really quickly, referring back to Raiders of the Lost Ark, they have those 10 things you didn't know about this movie, and number 8 will surprise you. They were talking about really cool stuff about Raiders of the Lost Ark, and again, back to that scene earlier when he's running out of the temple, and he triggers that giant giant
boulder,
ball,
yeah.
the boulder that's coming down to kill him. Basically in one of the takes, Harrison Ford wipes out and just barely gets back up in time. And it obviously wasn't a real concrete boulder, but it was heavy enough that it would have really hurt like hell if that actually hit him. So he's like, oh shit, and he's up and he's running like crazy, and Spielberg was like, I'm using that take. Yeah. That's the one that's in the movie. It's the one where he basically trips and almost wipes out. You could see on his face like, oh, I'm gonna get messed up. So yeah, it was the most authentic take because it really sold the consequence. Whereas if this had been a Michael Bay movie, the guy would be like, oh,
They would have rolled over him and then exploded, and he would have been okay.
Yeah.
It would have been like,
He just would have jumped, landed somewhere else, been really sweaty, had to take off his shirt all sexy.
I got a scar like right here.
That beginning scene uses action to teach us a lot about Indiana Jones.
mm-hmm.
You show he's at the beginning when he's trying to do the weight thing. He's showing his intelligence, and then just screw it, do it anyways.
And caution implies that he could be
Yeah.
hurt right away.
Yeah.
He's checking for all the traps throughout that entire thing. He's not running blindly through anything.
Yeah, he's clearly a man who's done this before, it looks like. And then when he does it, it seems like he's got it. It was like, oh, good. But then, which is an important thing in writing, you should learn this, is the but then or and then. I think but then, right?
Actually, it's
Yes, but then?
Okay, it's
Or no, but then.
Well, there's two things that are good, one thing that's bad.
Yeah.
But then is good because it's there was a consequence that you didn't expect. And therefore is also good, which is it's a consequence that maybe you expected, but et cetera and so on. And then is bad because that's just a sequence of events that maybe are unrelated.
Because then we get The Rock and realize that there is consequences to his actions, that he has failed this actually.
And the difference of, everything's already falling apart. Caution is over!
Yeah.
It's just trying to run faster than the arrows!
And then even once he gets past all those traps and he thinks he's finally made it, he still gets the idol stolen from him.
Because
He's still defeated in the
because
end.
Dr. Octopus, yes, that's the same actor who plays Doc Ock in the Spider-Man movie. Tries to tell him, throw me the idol, I'll throw you the whip.
Adios.
Bye-bye. Adios, senor. And which is great. But again, we can geek out over movies too much.
But
We'll crawl down
it's
this
that
rabbit hole.
acknowledgement of consequences that makes later
Yeah.
scenes better.
Yeah.
Like when he did it because he was sick on the day, and he was just like, why am I doing a freaking sword fight, man? I've got a gun. And just the whole scene with the guy like,
Epic.
and just shoots the swordsman. It's just like that's something that would really happen.
That's-
But
yeah.
again, lesser directors and lesser actors would have had this stupid fight
Whip
because it
versus
would have
sword,
looked
yeah.
cool, but it would have had one half of the emotional heft. And sometimes this short one punch action thing as opposed to the long sequence, well, fine, the long sequence is more meat technically and gives you more to look at. It doesn't have any weight versus somebody making the perfectly logical decision. Be like, I'm limited in this way. I'm going to win the fight the way I
It
know
shows
I
you
can
his
win.
character.
Bang, goodbye.
Yeah.
Logical decision brings up another point in action scenes and action stories. What I guess you would call flexible character IQ, that's a problem, where I've proven that I'm a tactical character. All throughout this story, I've thought about the angles, I've thought about how to plan this. But because the action scene is needed, I'm going to drop 100 IQ points in Act 3. I have an army of feral werewolf creatures that I can just say, go mess stuff up, but I'm going to sneak in as one guy! No.
Or
Do
in
not
horror
allow
films.
your... Huh?
In horror films, this is a scary place. Let's split up.
Yeah.
Or the James Bond, I could kill you now, but first.
And and that's a trap to not fall into. Anytime you're about to, and this is another statement that kind of goes along with the and then or etc. Wouldn't it be cool if is a dangerous thought.
Wouldn't it be cool if he could blow up this bad guy's whole fortress by shooting just one freaking spot that's out in the open? Yeah, as I've seen in like 6 frickin' Bond movies. And the latest one, I'm sorry, there's one in there too.
Carol, that's Star Wars right there.
What, you didn't like the last one?
There's
That's great.
self-destruct button. Don't press unless you really, 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 really mean it. Now here's the thing.
Self-destruct button.
Star Wars, the first Star Wars with the Death Star and the exhaust vent and everything like that. If you properly watch the movie, actually that gets a pass for a few reasons. Number one, a ship that big needs exhaust. The fusion reactor needs an exhaust vent. Number two, they say in the planning, the shaft is ray shielded, i.e. it's got a force field over it, so you're going to have to use photon torpedoes, which they indicate when everyone goes, oh. That's a really, really difficult shot to make.
Yeah.
So.
And finally, they had to steal plans to find this out. It's not like it was
Yeah.
just right there. They had
Yeah.
it took a
So-
lot.
Play adjective to that too. There was a bit where Luke, doing the farm boy, says, "Oh, that's 2 meters. I could hit a womp rat with from my T-34 like that." And then another guy goes, "Yeah, but were all those womp rats having blasters and shooting back up at you?"
Maybe.
Some of those womp rats.
Yeah.
But again, we can go down the movie rabbit hole, favorite movie rabbit hole. But
Womp rats could
Going
be
back,
like
going
Tusken
back
Raiders
to
tails.
like intro action scenes is that you can use an actro scene to show off your character's abilities. You can show off what their skills are at this moment. Like again, going back to Indy, he still succeeds at this stuff, but still gets beaten. Like he's still not perfect. And then as we go through and progress through different action scenes, you can see them getting better, building new skills, so that when they have to either face their action, the initial action, or something similar, they can now beat it, or you can show their character development through those scenes.
Or show their character development by overcoming the loss of the very thing that gives them that strength in the first place. I mean, that's what makes characters compelling, is solving their way out of problems that ordinarily they'd be able to do easy. You know, it's like the whole, it's like the whole old man in the sea thing, wherein the reason why that's a brilliant novel is not catching the big giant fish. It's how he comes to contend with losing what he's finally gained as he basically tries to get back to port, and the fish is eaten away. It's why it's one of Hemingway's most brilliant novels, and just using that, it's not contending with the abilities you have. It's finding ways to overcome the gaps that either circumstance or bad guys or whatever, your love for the wrong person. You could just phrase it kind of, but finding out how to contend with those things that basically take it away from you.
well, it goes going kind of to. I will come to you in 1 second, so you don't have to get a hand or anything. Going to the hero's journey archetype of plot structure. There's a reason that usually in something that follows the hero's journey, the hero has to reach a lowest point, be stripped of everything, and hit the cave and elixir scene, because it's you lose things, how do you deal with it? That's what defines you. Yeah. And then going back to the next part of the adventure, there was something you were also saying that maybe I'll get it back in just a second, so I'm going to go ahead and
Well,
go
it was
through.
kind of towards the last point about, because the idea that just came to my mind as I'm working on a story myself, and the intro is the ending of an action scene that's near the end of the actual story, but it doesn't finish it. It pauses at a point where the character has to start reflecting on everything up to that point, and from there you're able to see start, middle, end, returning to where you saw from the beginning. Would that be an idea that would also help develop the character to see where their skills lie, but not all of it, and then then see where the character develops those skills in the story until where he is now?
It can't. Oh, I know exactly the type of thing you're talking about, because that can be a little bit risky because it is kind of a TV trope. Because think about episodes of certain shows where to kind of confuse you.
What was it, the Breaking Bad season where it starts off with like the plane crashed?
Or it starts off with the aftermath of some disaster that you don't know.
And you don't actually find out. They show that, and then they don't show what actually happens till the end of the season, how it actually got to that point.
And that's kind of a masterful version of that because I was enthralled with that. I was enthralled with what's going to happen. But it can be risky because there are certain shows that start to rely on it as a trope because it's you've seen this episode of your favorite show, if you watch any show that has any action in it at all. The main characters are suddenly pointing guns at each other even though they're in love. Why would this happen?
Or they're walking over bleeding, about to die, and how have they gotten to this point?
Yeah.
Let's Tarantino it and go back.
48 hours earlier.
That goes in line with flashbacks, and flashbacks are a tricky one to do. Like, the method you're talking about could work, but I would also recommend just trying to write it normally and see where it goes. Like, it's easy enough, you can just cut, paste. But see if it actually gives you the effect you want, or if it just does, because sometimes it can be really cheesy, is the other issue, right?
But it just like the prologue, just a little snippet of what would happen, or that's still...
you can... There are ways to make it compelling and interesting. Like, again, Breaking Bad kind of did it.
I just want to go, okay. My question is, why do you feel you need that there? Do you feel you need it because you need to hook them? Because if you do that, actually Gungrave did this and it really annoyed me, is that you've got the first 2 episodes are really actiony, and then it completely drops off to start back at the beginning, where it's incredibly kind of like boring and you have to build up so far. So if you're trying to do it to hook your readers, because as soon as you start that story, it's going to be a lot of exposition and like build up, that's going to be boring. You should probably just focus on that and figure out what can I focus on at the beginning of the story to make people more interested, so they're building up to this giant action scene that you've got at the end, where he's displaying all his skills and putting himself to the test.
Or space things out so there's enough of it. Sell what you're actually offering. Don't.
It's a common trope to do the in media res action scene because it's snappy. You're right there. It's like things are blowing up. People are shooting at. What's going on? And it's good. But as soon as that's over, if you don't have something to follow it up or continue the action, or if I don't know where the rest of the story is going, it just drops so incredibly hard that it's certainly like, oh, well, grandma's on the farm and they had a kid and the horse was born and you're like, what happened?
But the horse turned bad.
You're really crushing your readers to go, you saw something awesome, don't worry, we'll get there again. Please stay with me,
Another thing you can do, if you do want to start with action that hooks your readers, if you have a character and you know they're headed towards this big life-changing action scene in the end, the prologue could be a different point where they were in peril. And they maybe learn something that's going to impact the story that is happening afterwards. A little bit of like 1 page of prologue, I think, could be the end of a previous time they were in peril and got through it, and maybe they're saying, I will never get myself in this situation again. Because then you have an interesting thing where the dramatic irony of the reader is watching, oh, you're getting sucked in again. You said you'd never get yourself into this again, but I can see all the hooks getting into you and pulling you into a position where you're going to be in a car, gunfight, whatever the action scene happens to be.
You fed them foreshadowing instead of an actual piece.
And that's...
The shotgun scene at the end of Dwayne Johnson's Walking Tall. Oh, I'll never use guns again. He avoids using them for the whole film, but when he gets the guns, it's double shotguns, kill everyone. This is why I don't use guns.
Yeah.
You didn't need to go to the gym at all.
You were talking about dropping the 100 IQ points for the dramatic confrontation, and it reminded me, Firefly, an episode called War Stories. Val's fighting one-on-one with the torture. He managed to break through his restraints and swing him, and the rest of his crew breaks in to rescue him. And Zoe, he was this like corporal during the war, says, let it go. This is something the captain's got to handle himself. And then Mal cries out, no, he doesn't. And as soon as he's out of the way, they fill the torture full of lead.
Yeah.
Well, but I fit the character because
Because
that's his attitude. When there's a threat, and if he'll just shoot it dead right off.
Yeah.
Without hands.
And they established that earlier in the series. And
The first one, he walks into a hostage situation on a ship, and he's having a bad day. And it's like, man, he
Yeah.
kills the hostage taker.
Yeah, we're done. Toss him out the back. Let's take off. This is no longer our problem, at least for the meantime. But one thing I do, as we're getting into this, I definitely want to talk about some of the body mechanics stuff that we had mentioned before.
Practice your fights. Like, actually get up and act them. That's my big point for that.
Specifically, there's we're just doing a rough transition, everyone. Story break. Now we're in body mechanics and things like that.
So do you mean like how do you portray action narratively? Like how do you
Or word
How
choice.
do you portray action? Yeah, how do you portray action narratively, word choice, and how do you avoid that whole the human body
and-
or the anthropomorphic wolf body or whatever doesn't move that way. So
I think that just regardless of the type of character it is, I mean it's an old trope, but it's kind of obvious, but it still has to be stated. Action should always be written. Basically, pacing is extremely important, and we always try to sort of give I always try to give the sequence of things a heartbeat. To sort of time things to how things are going on. So it's not just short, punchy dialogue, but it's a case of like a very bright, very specific narrative, only focusing on this precise things that get noticed and dealt with. Detail sort of falls off, except for basically you sort of try to intentionally give yourself a bit of tunnel vision. Just as a caveat, though, I mean, it depends what your perspective is. I mean, action written from an omniscient viewpoint is completely different, or can be completely different potentially, from action when you're basically writing it from like a first person or third person perspective. Yeah, the closer into behind someone's eyeballs you are, the more dicey things get, the more confusing things can get. I mean, depending on the character's interaction with the situation, their control of it, how they're interacting. Are they just a witness to a situation, or are they basically directly involved in it? Are they getting, shot at, fighting with somebody? And it's kind of trial and error, but just figuring out. I mean, do you guys have any kind of special techniques you use when you're trying to write like beat by beat action scenes?
I cut down as much as I can and make sure that my verbs are actually very punchy to the point. Like, he swung his fist, or he punched.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he punched, he walked, he stepped, he moved. You do have to. It is a bit of, you just get this feeling and a rhythm from either reading other stories or knowing what you want and seeing, like you can write a whole paragraph about just one punch. And the reaction that it hits, it combines how he thought about it, how he felt, and with the connecting. And it's those points where you want to slow down, and those other points where you want to speed up.
Another thing I would say about when you're getting a tempo for an action scene, don't overuse them, but do not be afraid of the short, swift sentence. Because one thing I've seen ruin action scenes and things I've been trying to read before is people who are used to long, detailed sentences and love them and seem to have a fear of short sentences. Sometimes for tempo in an action scene to have the breaks and the beats, you need a short sentence. You need at most, a compound sentence with a single conjunction, and that's it. Sometimes not even that. And then intersperse and pepper them appropriately to get those beats. And like you said, make each word really count.
Yeah, strip it down. No adjectives, no adverbs. It's a stock car in a way.
I'll use some
verb, but
some descriptors. But
he punched quickly is useless because normally you don't punch slowly, so a punch usually is quick. But
before I could see it, his fist rammed into my solar plexus. That's.
Also, I would totally recommend avoiding things like suddenly or and then. I really don't like and then. It's that one. I think is just more of my pet peeve. But still, these words that are like suddenly a fist was thrown. You could just have the fist thrown. It's suddenly happening right there on the page. You don't need to add in those extra verbiage. And that's where you start to slow the tempo down, is because you're adding these words that would normally sound perfectly fine in another sentence. But because you want to keep this action going and punchy and flowing, because he throws a punch, he throws a kick, he blocks, by suddenly going, well, he did this in reaction to that, he just did that. Like, there's these words that the more you edit and the more you pick at and the more you read, you start to realize that they aren't needed in there. And you can start to pick them out, and as you do, the sentences grow more compact, more stronger, and they just have more of a punch themselves.
Yeah, I'd argue suddenly is a word to be used very rarely and very cautiously, in my opinion, because it's not one of those words to completely toss out.
There's no
Because I don't
word
think
you
there's
can
no such
completely
word to
toss.
completely toss out. Neither is there a punctuation mark, neither is there anything, et cetera, and so on. But use it carefully. Look at the entire structure of the paragraph a few times and ask yourself, do I really need it here? Is it adding anything here?
I
And
love
that's
it
true of-
because you can write it without actually writing it there. By just having the action happen, it happens suddenly, and you've made something happen sudden without writing it sudden.
I guess the solitary exception would be if you're writing something from a period perspective and it's being narrated by a character. It's just one of those funny tropes, and I've seen this. The only place
telling the tale to a bunch of people back at the bar. Or
yeah,
the
well,
tavern.
the only place I see this anymore is in like historical Onion articles, where they're like writing about ancient, like they're writing about like 1912 pugilist battles between like two Irish guys who punch each other until their organs fly out of their mouths and stuff like this.
But suddenly he stopped to
yeah,
breathe.
he exclaimed with gross alacrity at the offense done to his spleen as he voided his.
Yeah.
Which really work basically for the fact that somebody just watched a troll fight where he's about to wind up on the ground wondering what the hell happened to him.
Oh yeah, you can.
Yeah. And it can, and again, for first-person narratives, it's
Like
it's a
the
little
next
more
thing I
forgiving.
knew, the roof was the sky or something. You know.
Yeah. The other thing, thinking about physical mechanics, one of the things I recommend everyone who's going to do any kind of action scene or anything where something might happen to a person, have in your reference desk, and if you're writing, you should have a reference bookshelf. Even though you have the internet, have a reference bookshelf. Grey's Anatomy. Have Grey's Anatomy, because if you're going to attack the body, if you're going to wound the body, if you're going to do anything to the body, you should be able to look up how it's put together so that you know how it's going to come apart.
I also heard, I can't remember where I heard it, but another good suggestion you can, especially if you're writing something that's going to get broken up often. You know, sometimes we can afford in real life the ability to just write for hours and just get a whole scene out of the way. Sometimes just because of life stuff. You're busy. You have to write this thing over a week, and you got to set it down. And the worst thing that happened is write an entire scene that seems brilliant until you forgot. Oh shit, that's right. 2 pages ago, he got shot through the knee. I forgot that. So you can have body maps where you actually put, just so you have that instant reminder to get yourself back, and you can show almost like a forensic thing. I heard this. You just have like a forensic map of the body. And it's like bullet here, graze here, bleeding profusely here, because it's not even that. It's like after the action. It's like people then go to the next room. Oh, what are you doing? Oh, nothing. It's like, well, how could the guy say, oh, nothing, when he's like shooting aortic blood out of his,
How was he skipping down the street when
Yeah.
he broke his femur?
Yeah.
And this is the other thing to remember,
Like they're
because
bleeding through their clothes.
yeah, a lot of people will rely on this, and while it is useful, while it can keep someone going to a certain extent, adrenaline is not magical go-go juice. At some point, it's
No, PCP.
yeah. Yes, PCP that kind of counts, or being a cyborg also counts.
Yeah,
as
that was in the
go-go
Terminator
juice.
movie. It's like, how'd that guy like punch his way through a windshield and get thrown through a wall and walked away? And Cop 2 was like, I was pretty sure it was PCP. Yeah.
Yeah, probably on PCP, broke every
Yeah.
bone in his hand, wouldn't feel it. That
Yeah.
kind of thing.
For a bit.
Yeah. It's just, yeah. So that's those, and these are just tools to have in the toolbox, or if you really want to. And what Ocean was saying a minute ago, if you're not sure how something would move, go ahead and slow-mo it. Slow-mo it in your writing den or in your bedroom, wherever you have space to.
Get your roommate
You know,
to come outside and just say, just
see
stand
how-
here for a second, or punch, not really punch, just throw a fist, and I want to see where it's going to hit,
Yeah,
or
I
how it's
want-
going to feel. And
No,
if you want to do a weird flip, like lay on your floor and just wave your arms around or something, trust me, it
And-
works, as ridiculous it is. Or get like 2 stuffed animals. I've done this just to,
Yeah.
okay, so if you're going to flip over him, you'd be like, just getting a sense of it in a real
Oh.
physical space
And
is
it's-
so helpful.
As silly as it sounds, if you're really looking at like stuffed animals, either artist models
Yeah.
or 2 fully posable G.I. Joe figures. Now, those stretch the limits a little bit, but their articulation is actually pretty good for, okay, I'm going to model this out and see, I want to know, can I reach behind and stab? Oh, it's going to be really awkward if I try and stab the guy.
What's the sword holster on the back?
Yeah.
It's always one that people are, but if you actually, the guy will have a 10-foot sword, and you're like, that's not gonna, no, that's my spine, yeah,
That's what the squares.
Again, if it has a cybernetic clip or something like that, then maybe, but...
there are certain things in anime and that do not work in real life, yeah.
And you can justify things depending on your setting, but you gotta know when you're out of points. It's just speaking in role-playing game.
And looking up accounts for when they're actually reacting to mounting injuries and things like that, so you can, you want to be like, the bullet through my knee felt like an ice cream headache times 50. You need to look up some sort of reference. It's inexplicable. Of course, no one for research purposes is actually going to shoot themselves in the knee. I hope not.
Please don't.
But enough people have experienced this throughout time, and there are enough accounts, like you said, that Google it. You'll find it somewhere. You'll find the information.
Ask me anything on Reddit or something like that.
It's like one of my favorite things is in the movie Hot Fuzz, when Nick Frost keeps asking him, "Oh, what was that like? What was that like?" It was the single most painful experience of my life, and I don't like to talk about it.
Best movie for dealing with stupid action tropes.
Yo.
No, I did not go sideways through the air, shooting both guns and screaming, ah.
And then they do it later.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, how would a character deal with something overwhelming on against them? I have a scene in the story where my character has to face a tank.
So how do they take a tank?
Well, okay, I don't want to spoil it.
Okay, so we'll take that thing with a tank. I'll just say that I'm writing a story and a guy has to take on a tank. So my first thoughts are, what are a tank's weakness? Generally, they have range. If I can get up close,
Tiananmen Square businessmen with briefcases.
That too. Unless they've got a gun on top, I can try to sneak up closer. Maybe put a bomb or something. They don't usually turn too well, depending on how old the tank is. So maybe I can run quickly around. What weapons do I have? Do I have C4? Do I have to get in the tank and actually remove the driver?
Yeah.
And so sometimes it's just brainstorming with people against how do I, because everything has to have a weakness. How can I propagate that weakness and use it? Where is this battle taking place? Is there a bunch of trenches? Is there a bunch of sewers where he's going to drive over top and I can try to get him from underneath? It's that's at least my suggestion is you clearly want to have this exciting action scene where it's like a David and Goliath, how would he take it down? But now you actually have to do the work into how would he take him down, because your reader's going to be thinking the same thing. And I always love this because some of them will be like, oh, this would be a great thing, and then, oh, that's what they did. And then there's the other half that'll be like, oh, I never thought about that. Mm-hmm. So
the other thing that I think you kind of want to do when you're planning, and this goes for anyone who's planning any similar scene like that, where against great odds, you have to do a bit of that one scene in Princess Bride. Okay, what are the liabilities and what are our assets? We don't have extra guys. We don't have etc. But we do have that wheelbarrow we left over the albino. We do have, we have the long Holocaust cloak. We have a torch. Okay, now we can work up a plan. And it's a fun scene, but what you can do with your characters, you can make in your notes, is what's going against this character? What does the tank have? It has armor plating. It has the big gun. It has smaller guns on the side, et cetera, and so on. What are and under your character's assets, you list the weak points of the tank that he might be able to get to. You list what weapons and equipment he has. Because sometimes the simplest, because going back to Indy, in the sword fight scene, he realized one of his assets was a gun, and he used it. If your character has a radio where he can call in an airstrike, that's an asset. That's that sort of thing. But it depends on your world, your setting, etc., and so on.
Now that I thought about it, it can't just be one thing. It has to be at least three.
Okay, can you make two tanks shoot each other or something? Like one of my favorite action tropes is in the anime genre is the rank of assassins, as I like to call it. Is you've got your main character and they have a certain set of skills, whatever that is, and then eventually they're going up a rank of assassins because they need. Well, Trigun is actually one of these because he's trying to get to the guy, but he's got the 13 bad guys, and each of them has a different skill set. He only has his skills. Occasionally you might get an upgrade now and then, but each guy is a different problem. How can I defeat them each time? What?
You ever seen Outlaw Star?
I love Outlaw Star. Yeah, I've only got 2 bullets, but what else can I do, right? I can't use all these bullets because then we're out of them. Like I love action like that because it's like each enemy that he comes is a new challenge, a new problem that he only has so many things that they can do to defeat what that is. Do I have to be smarter than them? Do I have to be more powerful than them? Do I have to negotiate with them? Like, and that's another way of exploring the character themselves.
That example, that Outlaw Star, is a really good one too, because that's a way to build tension through having your solution fail. I've got a bullet to solve this problem. It's a dud. Now you're in a huge problem.
Cheaper, so much for that, yeah.
Now you just made him mad.
Going to combats and furries. I mean, would furries actually punch?
It depends because a rabbit.
This is totally something we probably should have talked about for most of the panel.
We probably should have, but okay. Because a rabbit would probably be an expert in savate, which is kicks. It's all kicks. It's primarily kicks. Kicks that are designed to break a neck, that kind of thing. So whereas.
Like if we're having professional society UFC fights with furries, they're probably going to be like no claws, you know.
Yeah.
Maybe you have to wear a mouth guard that actually keeps your jaw shut so that you don't bite them.
But in the undergrounds, claws and teeth are okay.
Oh, jeez, you don't talk about Fight Club. Like that's another great thing about the furry aspect is now everyone is different. Like here amongst humanity, well, we all have, like some people can run faster, some people can lift weight, but the difference between like a rabbit that's going to be able to jump versus like an elephant that can just stomp you is much more monumental. And so you have a variety of different species that will have different strengths and weaknesses that you can then implore that into an action scene or into a character.
You better hit a weasel the first time because you can't grapple them and they'll just like strangle you with.
It's that fun game of like, oh, which character would what animal would they be like, because what traits are they sneaky or are they just buff?
Which comic book hero would win in a fight?
Yeah.
We had this last year.
Well, no. Here's the thing. He's always going to lose the first fight, but win the second one.
And then he'll find out that their mom's name is the same.
Did you see that T-shirt? Did you see the safe word is Martha?
The thing is the whole dark side thing. His mother, Martha. It's like, what the hell? It's like that is probably the worst weakness to have for a psychological weakness to have for a character, particularly in this line of movies.
Yeah, it's like, and then you find out there's one celestial being named Martha who is giving birth to all these godlike powered creatures.
We got a minute left. Does anyone have any other questions? Last minute questions?
Yeah.
Otherwise, we can just talk about comic books for 1 more minute.
We should have covered the furry aspect.
That was a good one. I forgot where we were.
It just.
Oh well.
Last thing on furry. I mean.
Yeah. No.
Because.
Oh, it's another thing. Like remember who your character is, and remember why we write furry. Are you ready? Because you just want him to be a fox? Fine. But if you really want to dig into that toolbox of why you're writing furry, why are you picking this species? And if they are this species, what does that mean? What are they good at? And I still get kind of annoyed, and I don't do it either, but like dogs are colorblind, but how many stories do we have where the dogs are actually colorblind?
Well, and you also, this goes to a question that you always have to ask. This is for action scenes, this is for plot, this is for structure, worlds and settings. How anthropomorphized are your animal characters? How far into the human traits are they? Because most...
Are they just animals with a human brain, or are they more humans with animal characteristics?
Yeah, and that's every level is okay for the anthropomorphic genre, but you have to pick which level your story is at and then be kind of consistent. And that's the important thing about, and especially with action, because that's going to determine a lot about how they fight, what sort of machines they construct to fight, that sort of thing.
I think that's time though, so.
And I don't know if there's something right after us, but there might
I don't
be.
think
so
there is, but
yes.
you gotta go, oh, right, we got that thing to go to.
Yeah,
You
the
can
thing
come
with the
too.
stuff in the
You
thing.
can come too.
All right.